Trier, the Roman city in Germany that outlasted Rome itself, stand in the center of Trier and look north along the Simeon Street. At the end of the street, rising above the rooftops of a small German city of approximately 110,000 people, you will see something that has no parallel anywhere north of the Alps. The Porta Nigra, the Black Gate, stands 30 meters high and 22 meters deep. Its massive sandstone block stacked without mortar, held together only by iron clamps that have long since rusted away, leaving the stone marked with dark staining that gave the structure its medieval name. It was built in the 2nd century AD. It has been standing continuously, on this exact spot, for approximately 1,800 years. Walk 10 minutes in any direction from the Porta Nigra and the scale of what Trier once was begins to become apparent. The remains of the Imperial baths, the Kaiserthermen, cover an area larger than many medieval cathedrals, their brick walls rising to heights that dwarf the modern buildings around them. The Basilica of Constantine, the Aula Palatina, is a single Roman hall so large that it served as the throne room of an emperor and now functions as a Protestant church, its dimensions unchanged since the 4th century. The amphitheater on the eastern edge of the city once held 18,000 spectators. The Roman bridge across the Moselle has been in continuous use since the 2nd century AD. This is Trier, in German, Augusta Treverorum. In the early 4th century AD, it was one of the largest cities in the Roman world, a city of perhaps 80,000 to 100,000 people, the residence of emperors, the administrative capital of the entire Western Roman Empire during one of the most consequential periods in the history of Western civilization. It is now a small city in the Rhineland-Palatinate region of Western Germany, most internationally known as the birthplace of Karl Marx. The gap between what Trier was and what it is today is one of the most dramatic urban transformations in European history, and the physical evidence of what it was is still standing, almost literally around every corner, waiting to be understood. Chapter 1: Origins and the Rise of Augusta Treverorum. The city that would become Trier had its origins in the territory of a Celtic people called the Treveri, who inhabited the Moselle Valley and the surrounding uplands. The region now divided between Western Germany, Luxembourg, and northeastern France in the pre-Roman Iron Age. The Treveri were a significant tribal group, mentioned by Julius Caesar in his account of the Gallic Wars, and their territory was incorporated into Roman control during Caesar's campaigns in the 1st century BC. The Roman settlement at the Moselle crossing point that would become Trier was established in the Augustan period, the reign of the Emperor Augustus, 27 BC to 14 AD, and the city takes its Roman name from this period, Augusta Treverorum, the city of Augustus among the Treveri. A Roman bridge across the Moselle was constructed in the 1st century AD, its stone piers still in place beneath the current Remerber ski. The Roman bridge that carries modern traffic across the same river on the same line today. The city grew through the 1st and 2nd centuries as a significant regional center, the capital of the province of Belgica, and later of the reorganized province of Belgica Prima, with the standard infrastructure of a Roman provincial city, a forum, public baths, an amphitheater, temples, and a street grid laid out on Roman colonial principles. The Porta Nigra was constructed in this period, probably in the 2nd century AD, as part of a comprehensive fortification of the city with a stone wall circuit and monumental gates. What transformed Trier from a significant regional center into one of the most important cities in the Roman world was the same process that had earlier elevated Milan. The political and military crisis of the 3rd century, and the consequent restructuring of Roman imperial governance under Diocletian's tetrarchy. When Diocletian divided the empire into 4 administrative zones in 293 AD, the western portion was assigned to Maximian as Augustus and to Constantius I as Caesar. Constantius chose Trier as his capital, and from that moment, Augusta Treverorum entered the highest tier of Roman imperial cities. It would remain an imperial residence for over a century, hosting some of the most consequential emperors of the late Roman period. Chapter 2: The Imperial City, Urban Scale and Layout. The Trier that developed during its century as an imperial residence was a city of genuinely extraordinary scale, fact that its surviving monuments confirm even in their ruined state. The city walls enclosed an area of approximately 285 hectares, one of the largest walled urban circuits in the Roman northwestern world, exceeded in the western provinces only by Rome itself and by a handful of other major cities. The population that filled this space is estimated by historians at somewhere between 75,000 and 100,000 people at the city's 4th century peak, making Trier one of the largest cities in the Roman Empire at a time when Rome itself was in demographic decline and when most cities north of the Alps had populations measured in the tens of thousands. The street grid of Roman Trier was organized on the standard Roman colonial principles, a Cardo Maximus running north to south and a Decumanus Maximus running east to west, but the Imperial period imposed an additional monumental layer on this basic structure: the construction of large imperial complexes. The palace, the baths, the circus required the reorganization of entire city districts and the creation of monumental spaces on a scale that only imperial patronage could fund and only imperial authority could impose. The northern gate of the Roman city, the Porta Nigra, anchored the northern end of the Cardo Maximus and served as the primary ceremonial entrance to the city from the north. Its scale makes its function clear. This was not merely a functional gate, but a statement of imperial power. Its massive sandstone blocks, some weighing over 6 tons, assembled without mortar into a structure designed to impress as much as to defend. The iron clamps that originally held the blocks together were extracted in the medieval period for reuse, leaving the holes that contribute to the building's distinctive weathered appearance today. The Roman bridge across the Moselle, the Remerber Ski, connected the city to the western bank and to the road network leading to Gaul and to the Rhine frontier. The current bridge rests on 9 Roman stone piers, their construction dated by dendrochronology of the timber foundations to the 2nd century AD. These piers, still in place, still carrying bridge traffic across the Moselle after nearly 1,900 years, are the most tangible expression of Roman engineering continuity in Trier, and arguably in all of Germany. Chapter 3: The Monuments. Architecture of Imperial Power. The monumental architecture of Imperial Trier represents the most complete surviving ensemble of late Roman imperial building anywhere in the world north of the Alps, a statement that requires no qualification and that the physical evidence fully supports. The Aula Palatina, the Basilica of Constantine, is the most immediately overwhelming of Trier's Roman monuments. Built under the Emperor Constantine I in the early 4th century as the throne room of his imperial palace complex, it is a single rectangular hall of brick construction measuring approximately 67 meters in length, 27 meters in width, and 33 meters in height to the top of the original ceiling. These dimensions made it, at the time of its construction, one of the largest single-room structures in the Roman world. Its apse, the semicircular end of the hall where the emperor's throne was placed, still contains evidence in the brickwork of the elaborate decorative scheme that once covered the interior: marble veneer on the lower walls, mosaic on the upper walls and ceiling, underfloor heating through a hypocaust system that maintained the hall at a comfortable temperature regardless of the Rhineland winter. The building stands today with its external dimensions and basic structure essentially unchanged since Constantine built it in the early 4th century. It has served as an episcopal palace, a medieval fortress, a Prussian barracks, and since 1856, as a Protestant church, the Evangelische Kirche, whose congregation worships in a Roman imperial throne room as a matter of weekly routine. The Kaiserthermen, the imperial baths, represent a different order of monumental ambition. Begun under Constantine I and continued under his successors, they were designed as one of the largest bath complexes in the Roman Empire. Their planned extent, if completed to the original design, would have been comparable to the Great Thermae of Rome itself. The construction was never fully completed. The complex was converted to military use before the bath function was fully operational, but what was built is remarkable in its incomplete state. The surviving brick walls rise to heights of over 10 meters in several sections, and the underground system of service corridors, the hypocaust passages through which slaves stoke the furnaces and manage the water supply, are accessible to modern visitors, giving a direct physical experience of the engineering infrastructure of a Roman monumental bath complex. The Barbara Baths, an earlier and fully operational bath complex of the 2nd and early 3rd century, are partly accessible separately. Their underground remains preserved beneath the residential neighborhood of the modern city. Trier has 2 major Roman bath complexes, a fact that reflects the extraordinary investment in public infrastructure that the city received across its Roman period. The amphitheater of Augusta Treverorum sits on the eastern edge of the ancient city, incorporated into the hillside in the standard Roman manner, using the natural topography to provide the banking for the seating rather than building an entirely freestanding structure. With a capacity estimated at approximately 18,000 spectators, it was one of the larger amphitheaters in the Roman northwestern world. It served not only as a venue for gladiatorial contests and animal hunts, but in the later Roman period, when the city's walls contracted as a fortified refuge incorporating the city's defensive circuit, the Imperial Palace complex from which Constantine and his successors governed the Western Empire extended across a large area of the northeastern section of the ancient city. Its precise extent is established by archaeological investigation, and its most visible surviving component beyond the Aula Palatina is the cathedral complex. The Trier Cathedral, the Dom, incorporates within its structure the remains of the Imperial Palace's private chapel, built under Constantine on the site of an earlier Roman structure. Beneath the cathedral, the remains of an elaborate Roman mosaic ceiling, fragments of which are displayed in the Diocesan Museum, document the extraordinary decorative investment of the imperial court in its Trier residence. Chapter for population and social structure. The population of Augusta Treverorum at its 4th century imperial peak was socially stratified in ways that reflected both the standard hierarchy of Roman provincial society and the distinctive character of an imperial capital. At the absolute apex of the social structure sat the emperor himself, and Trier hosted some of the most consequential emperors of the late Roman period. Constantius I governed from Trier until his death at York in 306 AD. His son Constantine I resided in Trier from approximately 306 to 316 AD, the period that included his victory at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 AD and the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, both of which were prepared and planned from this city. The emperors Valentinian I and Gratian both governed from Trier in the later 4th century. The presence of the emperor and the full apparatus of imperial government created a court society of unusual density and complexity. Senior military officers, the officials of the Praetorian Prefecture, the highest level of the late Roman civil administration, lawyers, rhetoricians, physicians, theologians, and the vast household of the imperial court, all concentrated in Trier during its imperial period. The Gallic aristocracy, the wealthy landowners of the Rhine and Moselle Valley, whose estates produced the wine for which the region was already famous, maintained urban townhouses in the city and participated in the cultural and political life of the imperial capital. The literary and intellectual culture of 4th century Trier was remarkable. The poet Ausonius, one of the most significant Latin poets of late antiquity, was born at Bordeaux, but spent significant time at the imperial court in Trier, and wrote his celebrated poem Moselle, describing the Moselle River and its valley with a vividness and topographic precision that makes it a genuine primary source for the landscape of Roman Trier and its surroundings. Ausonius describes the river, the vineyards on its banks, the villas of the wealthy, and the city itself with an affection that communicates the genuine attractiveness of the Moselle Valley as a place of civilized comfort in the late Roman world. The church was a growing institutional presence in the city throughout the 4th century, its position enormously strengthened by the Edict of Milan and the subsequent imperial patronage of Christianity. The bishopric of Trier, whose bishops claim continuity from the early Christian period, became one of the most important in the Western Church. And the massive investment in church construction in Trier that began under Constantine laid the physical foundation for the ecclesiastical infrastructure that would outlast the empire itself. Chapter 5: Daily Life, Trade, and Economic Activity. The daily life of Augusta Treverorum in the 4th century was shaped by the dual character of the city, a large, established Gallo-Roman urban center with its own deep economic roots, Transformed and amplified by the presence of the imperial court and its insatiable demand for goods, services, and specialized labor, the Moselle Valley economy was fundamentally agricultural, and viticulture was its most distinctive and economically significant activity. Wine production on the Moselle had Roman origins. The Romans introduced or significantly expanded viticulture in the region, and the wine trade was already an important element of the regional economy by the 4th century. Ausonius's Mosella describes the vineyards on the river's banks in terms that confirm both their extent and their cultural significance to the Romanized population of the valley. The wine of the Moselle region was consumed locally and traded along the river and road network to markets across the northwestern provinces. The road and river network centered on Trier was one of the most developed in the northwestern Roman world. The city sat at the convergence of major roads connecting it to the Rhine frontier, to the east and northeast, to the channel ports of Gaul to the northwest, to Lyon and the Mediterranean world to the south, and to the Rhine cities including Cologne to the north. The Moselle River connected the city to the Rhine at Koblenz, and from there to the North Sea trading routes. This connectivity made Trier a natural distribution hub for goods moving in every direction. The presence of the imperial court created demand for luxury goods on a scale that transformed the commercial character of the city. Fine textiles including the silk and purple-dyed wool that the court required in enormous quantities for ceremonial and official clothing, metalwork, ivory, precious stones, and the full range of objects required to maintain the visible magnificence of the late Roman imperial court had to be sourced, transported, and processed in or near Trier. The workshops that supplied the court attracted skilled craftsmen from across the empire, and the city that had been a prosperous regional center became, during its imperial century, a node in the luxury goods networks of the entire Mediterranean world. The evidence for the prosperity of 4th century Trier is not only architectural. The mosaic floors recovered from private houses in the city displayed in the Rheinisches Landesmuseum Trier are of a quality and sophistication that reflects genuine wealth and access to the finest craftsmen. The mosaic of the Moselle fishermen, the ceiling mosaic fragments from the imperial palace, and numerous floor mosaics from aristocratic townhouses document a city where private as well as imperial investment in artistic display was on a level comparable to the great cities of the Mediterranean world. Chapter 6: Constantine in Trier. The city that shaped the west of all the emperors who resided in Trier. None left a deeper mark on the city or on the history of Western civilization than Constantine, who governed from Augusta Treverorum from approximately 306 to 316 AD. Constantine arrived in Trier as Caesar following the death of his father Constantius I at York in 306 AD. He was proclaimed emperor by the army at York, a proclamation of debatable constitutional legitimacy that he spent the following years converting into unambiguous imperial authority through a combination of military victory, political skill, and the cultivation of divine support. From Trier, Constantine conducted military campaigns on the Rhine frontier, secured the western provinces, and prepared the campaign against the Emperor Maxentius that culminated at the Battle of Milvian Bridge outside Rome in October 312 AD. The victory at Milvian Bridge, attributed by Constantine to the support of the Christian God, led directly to the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, the agreement that established religious tolerance across the empire and set in motion the Christianization of the Roman world. The physical investment that Constantine made in Trier during his residence there transformed the city. The Aula Palatina, his throne room, was built in this period. The cathedral complex incorporating the imperial palace chapel was begun in this period. The Kaiserthermen were initiated under his direction. The city that Constantine left when he moved his operations eastward toward Constantinople was a more monumentally constructed, more architecturally impressive, and more institutionally significant place than the one he had inherited from his father. The theological and political decisions that Constantine made in and from Trier, the transition from persecution to toleration of Christianity, the beginning of imperial patronage of the Church, the convening of the Council of Arles in 314 AD to address the Donatist controversy, the invitation to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD that established Christian orthodoxy were among the most consequential decisions in the history of Western civilization. They were made by a man who had spent a decade governing from the city on the Moselle, whose administrative machinery, whose military forces, and whose political relationships had been built and managed from Trier. Chapter 7, The End of Imperial Trier and its Aftermath. The story of Trier's decline from imperial capital to post-Roman survivor is one of the most clearly documented urban collapses in the history of the Western Roman Empire, and one of the most instructive. The Western imperial court moved from Trier to Milan around 395 AD, then to Ravenna in 402 AD as the Visigothic threat under Alaric made northern Italy feel dangerously exposed. Trier's loss of the imperial court removed the institutional and economic engine that had driven the city's extraordinary growth, the same process that would later deprive Milan of its imperial character when Ravenna superseded it. The military catastrophe that had been building on the Rhine frontier struck with full force in the winter of 406 to 407 AD, when large groups of Germanic peoples, Vandals, Alans, and Suebi crossed the frozen Rhine, breaching the frontier permanently. The Roman military response was inadequate, and the province of Gaul was swept by the kind of large-scale raiding and occupation that the Rhine frontier had been designed to prevent. Trier suffered directly. The city was sacked multiple times in the early 5th century ancient sources, including the contemporary Gallic chronicle known as the Chronica Gallica of 452, record sackings of Trier in 411, 413, and again in 418 AD. The Salvian of Marseille, a 5th century Christian writer, described Trier in terms that make the scale of the destruction and depopulation viscerally clear. A city that had been among the greatest in the empire, reduced to a shadow of its former population and physical integrity within a generation. What is remarkable, and what makes Trier unlike most Roman cities in the northwestern provinces, is what survived and how it survived. The physical monuments were too massive to fully demolish. The Porta Nigra was converted to a church by the Greek monk Simeon, who lived as a recluse in the building from 1028 until his death in 1035, and whose sanctity led to its conversion into a church dedicated to him after his canonization, a conversion that almost certainly saved it from the stone quarrying that destroyed most Roman structures that lacked institutional protection. The Aula Palatina survived because it was repurposed first as an episcopal palace, then in various institutional roles that preserved its structure. The Roman bridge survived because it was indispensable. No medieval structure could replace it, and its piers remained the most practical crossing point of the Moselle throughout the medieval period. Most importantly, the bishopric of Trier survived. The institutional church, the one organization with the administrative capacity, the property holdings, and the long-term continuity to maintain urban life after the collapse of Roman state structures, kept Trier functioning as an urban center when its imperial function had entirely gone. From imperial capital to World Heritage Site, stand again in front of the Porta Nigra. The building you are looking at was constructed approximately 1,800 years ago. It has been a Roman gate, a medieval church, a residence, and since Napoleon ordered its restoration to its Roman form in 1804. A monument, the oldest and best preserved Roman gate structure surviving anywhere north of the Alps. Trier's Roman monuments were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986, a recognition that the ensemble of Roman structures surviving in this small German city on the Moselle of outstanding universal value to human civilization. The designation covers the Porta Nigra, the Aula Palatina, the Kaiserthermen, the Barbara Baths, the amphitheater, the Roman bridge, the cathedral complex, and the Imperial Baths, an inventory of surviving Roman structures that no other city north of the Alps can approach. What Trier teaches us about the Roman world is not primarily about the emperors who lived here, though their stories are extraordinary. It teaches us about the relationship between institutional longevity and physical survival. The monuments of Trier that are standing today are standing because they were either too massive to demolish economically, or because they were given institutional protection through conversion to religious or civic use that made their preservation in the interest of the people living around them. The Aula Palatina, where Constantine held court, the gate through which his armies marched, the bath complex he began and never finished, the bridge his predecessors built and which still carries traffic across the Moselle. These are not museums of a dead civilization. They are the working fabric of a living city, incorporated into the daily life of a community that has been continuously present on this ground for over 2,000 years. Rome itself fell. Its population collapsed. Its monuments became quarries. Its institutional structures dissolved into the medieval world that replaced them. Trier lost its emperor, lost its population, lost its imperial function, and suffered multiple sackings in the 5th century. But it kept its bishop, it kept its bridge, it kept its walls, and it kept, in the stones that were too large and too deeply embedded to move, the physical memory of what it had been. The Roman city that outlasted Rome is not a ruin. It is a city. It has always been a city. And if you stand in front of the Porta Nigra in the early morning, before the tourists arrive, and look up at 30 meters of Roman sandstone rising against a Rhineland sky, that is not a difficult thing to believe.